People first felt the need for wallets back when paper currency was introduced. In the US, that was in the 1600s. Before that, people used coins. To carry them, they had simple leather pouches with a drawstring. Those early wallets were made out of leather. These days, people can get quite sentimental when it comes to their wallets. Like this wallet here that has a really impressive story. It was initially owned by a man that then passed it on to his son when the guy reached the age of 13. The son literally used the wallet until it started to fall apart. He was so attached to the design that he kept looking online for an exact replica for years. He eventually found an almost new wallet in nearly perfect condition. Needless to say, his dad was very proud. There were studies out there on the amount of time needed to wear out your running shoes, but the numbers aren't about how much time should pass before you replace your shoes. Those are the number of miles you can use them for, about 200 to 600 miles. Most running shoe manufacturers say that their shoes are made to last 300 to 500 miles, which translates to about 3 to 6 months if you run 20 miles a week on average. Obviously, marathon runners need to replace their shoes more often since some can run 40 to 50 miles a week. But this person decided to look at their fitness tracker to see how long they'd been wearing their shoes. They ended up with a mind-boggling 3,100 miles in 2 years. Granted, those are boots, but these shoes still look like they've been stopping his car, like in the Flintstones. Another of those staple pieces that can hold a lot of sentimentality for people is the teddy bear. Some of the smallest teddy bears available for purchase are 0.29 inches tall. They're made by a South African manufacturer of micro bears. And some of their largest teddy bears are just over half an inch tall. On the other hand, the world's largest stitched teddy bear was created in 2008. It was 55 feet and 4 inches tall. It was named CT Dreams, or Connect the Dream. You can check it out if you want. Just head to Exploration Place in Wichita, Kansas. There's even a name for teddy bear collectors and fans, an arctophile. It's made out of a combination of the Greek words arctos, which means bear, and philos, which means loving. One person was lucky enough to stumble upon the same version of their childhood teddy bear 20 years later. When placed next to each other, you can clearly see which one of those two products has seen over 20 years of messy snuggles and washing. If you're a fan of crafting and sewing, you'll be surprised to know that the oldest known sewing needle dates back to 60,000 years ago. It was made out of bird bones and was discovered in South Africa. Other similar needles crafted out of bone or ivory were discovered in Europe and Asia, going as far back as 45,000 years ago. Even the first modern needle, the one with an eyelet, is somewhere around 25,000 years old. If you look through a really good magnifying glass or a microscope at a needle tip, you'll see why it needs to be changed at certain intervals of time. Just look at this picture and you'll understand why. Specialists say that when it comes to sewing machine needles, they need to be replaced every 20 or so hours of sewing. Why? Because even an object so small and sharp as a needle can deteriorate after some time and potentially damage the fabric around the stitch. In more delicate fabrics, blunt needles can cause bad tension. It's also best to use appropriate needles for certain fabrics, like ballpoints for knits, thinner needles for lighter fabrics, and thicker needles for heavier fabrics. Ever heard of clogs? They're a type of shoe that is made partially or completely from wood. They're mostly used as protective footwear in agricultural activities. You'll also see them used in some type of dance because of the sound they make when hitting the floor. Clog dancing is actually at the root of today's tap dancing. If you look at this person's new and old clogs, you'll see how they wear and tear over time. It's easy to understand why some people have compared them with a potato and a peeled potato. I've always wondered though, are they comfortable? I mean, they're made out of wood and that doesn't sound comfy to me. However, most people that like wearing clogs say that after some time, they retain the shape of your feet and become quite comfortable, despite being completely rigid. Let's look at some everyday objects that are older than you think too. like the world's oldest piece of chewing gum, which is said to be 5,000 years old. It was stumbled upon by an archaeology student in 2007. It happened in Finland. Scientists suggest that people that lived in the Neolithic era used to chew gum to deal with their gum problems. How did the researcher figure out it was exactly chewing gum, though? Mostly because of the tooth marks that were left on the piece. This small piece of tar was said to give a lot of information about its owner too, like the dietary preferences and even their DNA. Fast food is older than you might think. If we look at our history, this culinary concept dates back to the ancient Romans. They called their fast food restaurants thermopolia. The word translates to places where hot drinks are sold. A lot of these ancient restaurants had small rooms with large countertops at the front. Some of them had some sort of tiny dining areas too. But historians are convinced their primary purpose was to sell takeout food. Like most of us these days, a lot of ancient Romans didn't have where or when to make meals at home. As for menus, they were clearly not as fancy as what we have today. Most of these places served various mixtures of lentils, meats, and cheeses. We've come to rely on online maps to get almost everywhere, but these car navigation systems are not as modern as you'd think. One called the Iter Avto dates back to the year 1932 and is the first car navigation system ever. This amazing invention used a map on a scroll. Like most of its modern computers, it was placed on the dashboard of a car. It also came with a set of paper maps. The maps were stretched across a display, and the whole thing was connected via a cable to the speedometer, which controlled the speed at which the scroll was moving. Its purpose was to move the scroll on the preset map based on the speed of the car. Your everyday hoodie isn't as modern as you'd think either. Hooded clothes appeared in the medieval period in Europe, or even earlier. Back then, people wore tunics with hoods, which were known as cowls. Even the word hood itself comes from the Anglo-Saxon word hod, which is similar to hat. One US company brought the hooded sweatshirt to the US market, introducing the first items in the 1930s. They started making hoodies after figuring out how to sew together thicker materials. Initially, the main purpose of these garments was to keep people working outside warm during cold winters in upstate New York. Modern hoodies became popular back in the 1970s because of several factors. The rise of hip-hop culture in New York City had a lot to do with it, as well as the fact that high fashion started growing exponentially at this point. But it wasn't until the blockbuster movie Rocky that the era of the hoodie really took off. At about the same time, students started to wear hoodies with their university logos to show off where they were studying.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.